Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling something a little bit different. Instead of going deep on like a news story or a specific event, we're going to be diving deep into a place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So have you ever wanted to like work at an Ivy League school?
Yeah. Who hasn't, right?
Yeah. So we are going to try to figure out what it would be like to work at Brown University.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like not to go there as a student, but like to work there.
Right. Not as a student, but as like staff or faculty, I imagine. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so we got our hands on some pretty interesting source material. Like we have some promotional material that Brown put together about why you should work there. But then also we have some articles and statistics about things like the average salaries and stuff like that. So we're going to be looking at both of those.
Okay. Yeah. It is sort of like trying to figure out company culture from like just their careers page.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we all know how kind of spun that can be sometimes. So this will be interesting to see like what we can actually glean from this.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I think is the most interesting about Brown is just the contrast between, this image of this like really prestigious, really old institution
Yeah.
founded in 1764.
Right.
And then on the other hand, you have all this language about how Brown is a really nimble place to work. It's really fast-paced. They use the words breakneck speed even.
Wow. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, this begs the question, can you have both? Can it be both like a haven for centuries-old tradition, but also be a cutting-edge, dynamic place to work?
That's what we're going to find out.
Yeah.
So let's dive in. One of the first things that I thought was really interesting is this word nimble.
Okay.
So there's this quote from Jared Canizé, I hope I'm pronouncing that right,
Sure, I think so.
who's the CEO of academicjobs.com. He calls Brown nimble and talks about their commitment to bringing together professors and students.
Yeah, so his perspective is interesting because he has this kind of bird's eye view of the academic world. He's working with university rankings and placing different schools. So he's comparing them, I guess, and sees something unique in Brown's approach.
Yeah. So my question is, what does this actually mean? Like nimble, that's a kind of vague word. What does it actually look like in practice?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about this practically, what specific mechanisms could be making Brown like less rigid than the average large research university?
I don't know. You tell me. You're the expert.
Well, I don't work at Brown,
Right.
but maybe one thing could be their kind of famous open curriculum.
Oh, yeah.
So students there, they're not locked into like rigid major requirements, and they are encouraged to really explore different fields and make their own paths,
Yeah.
create their own interdisciplinary paths. So this kind of academic freedom, I mean, think about this. This demands a certain kind of flexibility from the university itself.
I see what you're saying.
Right. So if students are pushing boundaries and, making new connections between disciplines, well, then the university has to be able to keep up, right? They have to adapt.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not just the students who are kind of moving quickly. It's the whole institution that has to be able to respond to that.
That's right. And I think, this could apply even beyond just the academics. Think about like the administrative staff, the support staff, everybody that makes the university function. They all have to be kind of on their toes to respond to all this.
The changing student needs and new research initiatives. And, I imagine the world of higher education is changing really fast right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe nimble is like a characteristic of the entire work environment,
Yeah.
not just for students and professors. But it's interesting because would you want to work in that kind of place?
Yeah, that's a great question. It could be seen as exciting and stimulating, I guess, but I can also imagine how it could be a little overwhelming.
Right.
Like always having to be adapting to new things. And maybe it's not as secure.
Yeah, it's not for everyone, is it? I mean,
Mhm.
some people love that kind of constant change and challenge, while others really thrive with structure and predictability.
So for you listening out there, think about that. Think about what you like, what kind of environment you work best in.
Mm.
Would you be like, energized by this breakneck speed
Yeah.
at Brown?
Yeah. Or would you be like, whoa, this is too much for me. I need to slow down.
Yeah.
And, just thinking about the breakneck speed, I feel like that might be a bit of hyperbole.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably not literally breakneck speed, is it?
I don't think so.
But it is suggestive that the university is responsive, adaptable, and, that could be good or bad depending on your perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've kind of established that Brown is probably a pretty fast-paced and dynamic place to work. But let's move on to something else that the source material really emphasizes. Brown's commitment to connecting professors and students.
Okay, yeah.
So how does that fit in with what we've been talking about?
Well, this focus on connection could be another part of what makes Brown nimble, actually.
So,
If the faculty are really genuinely engaged with their students, they're going to be more aware of new trends and new areas of inquiry.
right.
And that kind of close interaction can make for a more responsive and adaptable academic environment.
Yeah, so it's not just about being friendly and knowing your students' names. It's about actually having that close contact that allows kind of a feedback loop to develop where students' interests could actually shape the research and the teaching.
Right, yeah, exactly. And imagine working in that kind of environment, where your ideas are actually valued and you get to collaborate with experts in your field, at the top of their game.
And you're constantly learning and growing, right?
Yeah, that sounds pretty great, actually.
Yeah, but here's my question. How does this actually translate to the work experience of someone who's not a professor, who's not a student? Because most people working at Brown are not going to be teaching or conducting research.
Right. Yeah, that is the real question. Does this emphasis on connection create a better work environment overall for, the IT staff, the janitorial staff, the administrative staff, everyone?
Like, is it just this nice, like, you know, collaborative, supportive place for everyone, or is that just limited to the classroom?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question.
Yeah, to figure that out, we're going to have to look beyond what the university is telling us and try to figure out what people are actually saying.
Right, like what their actual experiences are.
Yeah, maybe those state-of-the-art facilities they keep mentioning might give us some clues.
Right. What do those look like? Are they designed to foster collaboration? Or are they more, siloed and hierarchical? We'll see.
Okay, so speaking of diving deeper, there's this whole section in the material about why work at Brown.
Of course there is. Every company has that, right?
Yeah. So in the next part, let's unpack that.
Let's do it. I'm curious to see if there's any actual evidence behind those claims or if it's all just marketing fluff.
Let's find out.
So this why work at Brown section, hits all the usual, the usual suspects. You've got your competitive salaries, diverse culture, stimulating intellectual environment. Come on.
It's like a Mad Libs for university, job postings.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So, are these just buzzwords or is there something more here?
That's what we're going to try to figure out, right? Like, are there actual concrete things we can point to
Yeah.
say, like, yes, Brown is a good place to work?
Right.
Or are they just trying to, make it sound good?
Yeah. Well, okay. So one thing they do mention, a specific detail, is Brown's significant research funding. So in 2020, they had $246.6 million in research funding.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so they are serious about investing in research, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not just something they're saying. They're actually putting their money where their mouth is.
Right, yeah. But how does that actually trickle down to the employee experience? Does it lead to more opportunities for professional development? Or is it all just going to the big research labs?
Yeah. What about those state-of-the-art facilities they keep mentioning?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm picturing sleek labs, collaborative workspaces, maybe a nap room stocked with kombucha on tap.
You're like,
How cool would that be?
right. But we've all seen those marketing photos that are like super nice, and then you actually get to the office and it's like, oh, okay.
Totally.
It
It's
was
all about how the facilities are used, right? It doesn't matter how fancy they are if they don't actually support a good, creative and collaborative work environment.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, for you listening out there, what are your non-negotiables? Like, what are the things that you would need in a work environment to make you feel excited about going to work every day?
Right.
Regardless of the prestige, regardless of the job title, what are the things that you need?
Yeah, for some people, it might be that cutting edge technology or the chance to rub elbows with brilliant minds.
You know?
But for others, it might be something else entirely, like a strong sense of community or good work-life balance.
Yeah. And that brings us back to that question we asked at the beginning.
Mm,
Can a university be both elite and dynamic?
right. Yeah.
Can it offer the prestige of the Ivy League and a work environment that feels genuinely supportive?
It's possible, but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
We've seen some hints, right?
Yeah.
With that emphasis on nimbleness and connecting professors and students and the research funding. We need more than just hints.
Yeah. So what's the main takeaway for our listener who's like, okay, Brown sounds kind of cool, but I want the real deal?
Yeah. I think the key is you've got to go beyond the surface, right? Don't just rely on the official website or the brochures.
Mhm.
Like, dig a little deeper. Look at employee reviews, you know?
Yeah.
Look for articles about Brown's workplace culture. Maybe even reach out to somebody who works there.
Networking.
Right. Always a good idea.
Yeah.
A quick conversation with someone who's actually, like, in the trenches that can give you insights that you wouldn't get anywhere else.
Totally. Yeah. And, they can tell you if the stuff that they're promoting, like this collaborative spirit, is actually real or if it's all just for show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And speaking of things that might be for show, that competitive salary they mentioned, like, what does that actually mean?
Right.
Like, is it actually competitive, especially considering it's an Ivy League school and the cost of living in Providence? Like, is it actually a good salary?
Yeah, you'd want to, like, research salary ranges for specific positions and see how they compare to, similar roles at other universities or even in other industries.
Yeah, don't just assume that because it's Brown, you're going to be making bank.
Right.
You know?
And speaking of Providence, I think that's another important piece of the puzzle here, right? Like, the university might be amazing, but if the city itself is not a good fit, that could really impact your overall experience.
Yeah. It's like, what's the vibe of Providence?
Yeah.
Is it like, is it one of those like fun, college towns? Is it a vibrant cultural hub?
Mm.
Or is it, more laid back, more residential? Like, what kind of place is it?
Yeah, and, like, how does the cost of living compare to other cities?
Yeah.
Like, rent, groceries, transportation, all that stuff can really affect your quality of life no matter how much money you're making.
Yeah.
So, I mean, before you get too caught up in the allure of working at Brown, make sure you've done your research on Providence too, right? Like, does it align with your goals and your lifestyle?
All right, so we've talked about the potential perks. We've talked about the potential pitfalls.
Yeah.
But let's not forget about the elephant in the room.
Oh, boy.
Prestige.
Like, there's no denying that working at an Ivy League school carries a certain,
Cachet.
cachet, yeah. Like, it looks good on your resume.
Yeah.
It opens doors.
Yeah, you get instant respect in certain circles.
Yeah. So how much weight does that actually hold?
Yeah.
Like, is it worth sacrificing other priorities for?
That's a really personal question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, for some people, they might be willing to put up with, a really demanding work environment.
Yeah.
Or a super high cost of living just for that prestige.
Right, just to be able to say that they work at Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But others might say, no, I'd rather prioritize a healthy work-life balance or, a supportive team culture.
Yeah.
Or a city that I actually like living in.
Right.
Regardless of the name on the building. Right?
Yeah.
So it all comes down to you. Like, what matters most to you?
Yeah.
Is that Ivy League allure enough to outweigh the potential downsides?
Yeah. Or are there other things that are more important to you in your career? Right. Because at the end of the day, it's all about finding the right fit, right?
Yeah.
Like the place where you can really thrive, both professionally and personally.
Yeah.
And maybe that's Brown, but maybe it's not.
Maybe it's somewhere else entirely.
Right.
Yeah. So let's shift gears a little bit and go back to that quote from Jared Kanize about Brown being nimble.
Okay.
He specifically mentioned their commitment to, like, connecting professors and students.
Right.
And it's interesting. He's not like, praising their research output or like how smart everybody is.
Right.
He's talking about their culture,
Yeah.
about their approach to like learning and teaching.
That's a good point. It's like he's saying that Brown is trying to break down those traditional barriers, right?
Yeah.
Between students and faculty.
Yeah, like that image of the ivory tower.
Right.
You know?
The professor as this like distant, unapproachable figure.
Yeah. And that is kind of a stereotype of elite institutions, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like the professor is up here and the students are down here.
Right. But Brown is like, no, we don't want that. We want everybody to be on the same level.
Yeah. So how does that actually play out in practice? Like what are the actual mechanisms for making that happen?
Well, for one, think about Brown's like relatively small student body.
Okay.
They have around 10,000 undergrads.
Oh, wow. That is pretty small for an Ivy League school.
Yeah, and they have over 1,500 faculty members teaching more than 2,000 courses.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's a pretty low student-faculty ratio, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just like a nice sentiment. It's actually built into the structure of the university.
Right.
Yeah.
And that can lead to more personalized attention, more chances for mentorship,
Yeah.
and just a greater sense of community within the departments.
Yeah, but here's the question again. Does this Does this connection extend beyond the classroom?
Right,
You
right.
know,
Yeah.
does it affect the work environment for staff members who are not involved in teaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, does this emphasis on connection create a more collaborative and supportive environment overall? Or is it just limited to, the classrooms and the labs?
Yeah, and to answer that, I think we need to like get out of the official sources, like
Yeah.
get out of the stuff that the university is putting out
Yeah.
and like see what people are actually saying,
Right.
you know?
Like, look at employee reviews on Glassdoor or like read blog posts from current staff.
Yeah.
I think that would give us a much better picture of what it's actually like to be part of the Brown community.
Yeah, totally. And, I think it's important to remember that even if the university is promoting a certain culture, individual departments and teams can be very different,
Oh, absolutely.
you know?
Like, you could have one department that's super collaborative and another one that's like totally siloed and hierarchical.
Right. And it's all under the umbrella of Brown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, if you are considering a job at Brown, you've really got to do your research on that specific department.
Yeah. Okay, now let's go back to that why work at Brown section.
Okay.
It mentions a diverse culture,
Right.
but what does that actually mean in this context?
Yeah, that's another one of those buzzwords that we need to unpack a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
what are the actual demographics of the staff and faculty?
Yeah.
And more importantly, like, how does the university actually foster a sense of belonging and inclusion for employees from diverse backgrounds?
Yeah. Are there active, diversity inclusion initiatives in place?
Right.
Like, do employees feel like their voices are heard?
Yeah, and do they feel valued regardless of, their race or ethnicity or gender identity or sexual orientation?
Yeah, all those things are really important.
Yeah, and these are questions that you would definitely want to ask during the interview process.
Yeah.
Like, don't be afraid to probe a little bit and really get a sense of, Brown's commitment to creating a truly inclusive work environment.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting that diversity is not just about numbers. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels respected and valued,
Right.
where different perspectives are actually welcomed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that kind of environment can lead to greater creativity and innovation,
Yeah.
like better problem solving.
Yeah. And when everyone feels like they can bring their whole selves to work,
Right.
that's when you get the best out of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But creating that kind of culture, it takes effort
Yeah.
and a real commitment from leadership.
Yeah. So it's important to investigate how Brown is actually putting these values into practice.
Absolutely. Like, don't just take their word for it.
Right.
Look for evidence
Yeah.
in their policies, their programs.
Yeah.
Talk to employees.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the potential perks of working at Brown, the nimble environment, the research opportunities, all that good stuff.
Right.
But let's not shy away from the potential downsides.
Right. Because no
Right.
workplace is perfect.
Yeah.
And Ivy League institutions, they come with their own unique set of challenges.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest ones is the pressure to perform.
Right.
You're surrounded by brilliant minds,
Mm.
high achievers.
Yeah.
You're constantly aware of this legacy of excellence.
Yeah.
That can be motivating, but it can also be incredibly stressful.
Yeah. And the competition for resources and recognition can be really fierce,
Yeah.
especially in a research-driven environment like Brown.
Yeah. You might find yourself constantly having to justify your work,
Mm.
fight for funding.
Right.
Yeah. And let's not forget about the potential for elitism,
Right.
you know.
That sense of exclusivity.
Yeah, working at an Ivy League school can feel like you're in a bubble sometimes.
Yeah.
Detached from the realities of the outside world.
Right. It's a very specific kind of culture.
Yeah.
Often very formal, very hierarchical,
Yeah.
very focused on tradition and reputation.
Yeah. And that might not be a good fit for everybody.
Right.
Some people might thrive in that environment. Others might find it really stifling.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you're considering a job at Brown, you really got to be honest with yourself about your own work style,
Yeah.
your preferences. Like, would you be energized by the challenge and the prestige?
Yeah.
Or would you feel overwhelmed and out of place?
Yeah. And there's no right or wrong answer.
Right.
It's just about finding the environment that best suits you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about that breakneck speed thing again.
Okay.
It definitely creates this image of a very fast-paced, demanding workplace.
Right.
But is that accurate?
Well, I mean, it probably varies depending on the department and the specific role
Yeah.
and the projects you're working on.
Right.
Like some areas are probably way more intense and deadline driven than others.
Right. But the development office is pretty crazy. They're trying to like raise money all the time.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's really important to ask about work-life balance in that specific department
Yeah.
during the interview process.
Yeah. You don't want to go in there and be like, oh, I thought it was going to be chill. And that's like crazy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, even if the overall pace is fast, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are working like crazy hours or sacrificing their personal lives.
Right. Like a truly nimble organization should be able to adapt to the needs of its employees
Right,
and create a sustainable work environment.
exactly.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to ask about, flexible work arrangements,
Yeah.
vacation policies,
Yeah.
just the general attitude towards work-life balance.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you want to find a workplace that respects your time
Right.
and allows you to like thrive,
Absolutely.
both professionally and personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, speaking of thriving, the source mentions that Brown is committed to creating, preserving, and disseminating knowledge for the benefit of society.
Okay, that's a pretty standard mission statement for a university. But it does give us some clues about the kind of people who might, really thrive there.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Well, it suggests that they're looking for people who are, driven by a sense of purpose,
Okay.
passionate about intellectual inquiry,
Yeah.
and they believe in the power of knowledge to make a positive impact.
Right.
To make the world a better place.
So it's not just about having the right skills.
Right.
It's about like buying into their values.
Exactly. They want people who are excited to be part of something bigger than themselves,
Yeah.
who are committed to, contributing to the greater good.
Yeah. So if you're listening out there, think about that. Does Brown's mission resonate with you?
Yeah.
Like, do you see yourself thriving in that kind of environment?
Yeah. And if the answer is yes, then Brown might be a good fit. But if you're, mainly motivated by prestige or, making a ton of money, then you might want to think twice.
Yeah, because working at a place like Brown, it's about more than just a job title or a paycheck.
Right.
It's about being part of a community
Right.
of scholars and researchers and educators
Yeah.
who are dedicated to making the world a better place.
Yeah. And that can be a really rewarding experience.
Yeah.
Both professionally and personally.
Yeah, so if you're looking for a workplace that challenges you intellectually, that pushes you to grow, that allows you to contribute to something meaningful, then Brown might be worth exploring.
But remember, it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
It's important to weigh those potential benefits against the potential downsides.
Yeah.
And make a decision that aligns with your own values.
Okay, so let's say you've done your research, you've weighed the pros and cons, and you've decided, you know what, I'm going to apply for a job at Brown.
Okay.
What are some key things to keep in mind during the interview process?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, first and foremost, be prepared to articulate why you're interested in working at Brown specifically.
Yeah.
Don't just say, oh, I'm impressed by your reputation, or your research is really cool. Go deeper. Talk about their mission. How does it resonate with you?
Yeah.
What specific aspects of their work excite you?
Yeah.
And how do your skills and experience align with their needs?
Yeah, show them that you've done your homework.
Right.
Yeah.
That you're genuinely interested in being part of the Brown community.
And don't be afraid to ask tough questions.
Oh, absolutely.
We've talked about a lot of potential challenges and downsides of working at Brown. Don't shy away from those topics during the interview.
Right. Ask about work-life balance.
Yeah.
Diversity and inclusion initiatives.
Yeah.
The culture of that specific department. Anything that's important to you in a work environment.
Yeah, because the interview is a two-way street.
Exactly.
It's not just about them evaluating you.
Right.
It's also about you evaluating them.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You want to make sure that Brown is the right fit for you,
totally.
both professionally and personally. So don't be afraid to ask tough questions and really get a sense of what it would be like to work there.
And remember, even if you don't get the job, the interview process itself can be a really valuable learning experience.
Absolutely.
You know?
It can help you clarify your career goals, figure out your strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
and just refine your interviewing skills for next time.
Yeah.
So go into the interview prepared, confident, curious. Ask thoughtful questions, listen attentively.
Yeah.
and just be yourself.
Yeah. And most importantly, don't be afraid to walk away if you don't think it's the right fit.
Absolutely.
Like there are other fish in the sea,
Right.
you know?
Plenty of other amazing opportunities out there.
Yeah.
And the right job for you is the one that aligns with your values, your goals, your aspirations.
Yeah.
And speaking of speaking of opportunities, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about Brown's location.
Oh, yeah. Providence.
Providence, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
We can't forget about the context, right?
Yeah. Like it's not like Brown is just this, like, idyllic college town.
Right, exactly.
It's in a real city.
Providence is a real city
Well,
with its own history and culture and, challenges.
So before you get too caught up in, like, the idea of working at Brown,
Mhm.
you need to think about whether Providence is a place where you could actually see yourself living.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what's the cost of living like there?
Yeah.
What's the vibe? Does it align with your lifestyle?
Exactly. Like those are all super important questions to research before you make a decision.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with cost of living.
Okay.
How does Providence compare to other cities in terms of rent, groceries, transportation, all that stuff?
Well, from what I've seen, it seems like the cost of living in Providence is a bit above the national average,
Okay.
but it's significantly lower than like major metro areas.
Like Boston?
Yeah, like Boston or New York.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's not exactly a bargain,
Right.
but it's not ridiculously expensive either.
Yeah.
It's definitely more affordable than some other cities where you might find similar job opportunity.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, what about the overall vibe? Like, what's it like to actually live in Providence?
Well, from what I've gathered, Providence is a city with like a rich history and a really vibrant arts and culture scene.
Oh, nice.
It's home to several universities, including Brown, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's got a kind of youthful energy
Okay.
and a diverse population.
Okay, that sounds good.
It's also known for its historic architecture
Okay.
and its like thriving culinary scene.
Okay.
And it's also close to the beaches of Rhode Island.
Oh, okay. So you've got the city and you've got the beach.
Exactly.
Not bad.
Yeah, not bad at all.
Okay, so it sounds like Providence has a lot to offer, both professionally and personally.
Yeah, it does. It seems like a really cool city.
Okay. But let's not forget that every city has its challenges.
Right.
Like, what are some of the potential downsides of living in Providence?
Well, like any city, it has its share of crime, poverty,
Yeah.
and the winters can be pretty harsh.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Lots of snow and cold temperatures.
Okay, so it's important to be realistic about those realities of urban living.
Right.
Like, no city is perfect,
Exactly.
and Providence is no exception.
Right. But I think for the right person, it could be a really fantastic place to live,
Yeah.
work, and play.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the cost of living, the overall vibe, the pros, the cons, but how does Providence specifically connect to the experience of working at Brown?
Well, for one thing, the university is really embedded in the fabric of the city.
Okay.
Like, Brown's campus is right in the heart of Providence,
Okay.
and a lot of faculty and staff live in the surrounding neighborhoods.
Yeah. So it's not like you're working in this like isolated bubble separate from the city.
Right, exactly. You're part
Yeah.
of the larger community.
Yeah.
And your work at Brown can actually, like, impact the city
Yeah.
in meaningful ways.
Yeah. And vice versa. Like the city's culture and resources can enrich the work experience.
Absolutely. For example, Brown is really close to the Rhode Island School of Design.
Oh, yeah. RSD.
Yeah, RSD. And that creates all sorts of cool opportunities for collaboration and cross-disciplinary learning.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And, the city's vibrant arts and culture scene that can provide inspiration and like just fun things to do outside of work.
Yeah. So it sounds like a pretty good relationship between the city and the university.
Yeah, it's a symbiotic relationship.
Okay.
Brown benefits from being in a cool city like Providence,
Yeah.
and Providence benefits from having a world-class university like Brown.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a win-win. And it's something to keep in mind when you're considering a job at Brown, right?
Yeah.
Don't just think about the university itself. Think about the city, too.
Yeah. Okay, so we've explored the potential benefits, the potential downsides, the context of Providence.
Right. But what's the bottom line for our listener who's trying to decide, should I apply for a job at Brown or not?
Yeah, I think the key is to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
What might be a dream job for one person could be a nightmare for another.
Yeah. It all comes down to your individual preferences, your priorities, your goals.
Exactly. So if you're considering a job at Brown, The most important thing is to be honest with yourself about what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Like, what are your non-negotiables?
Yeah.
What are you willing to compromise on?
Yeah.
And how does Brown align with your overall career
Yeah,
aspirations?
that's a good point. Once you've answered those questions for yourself, then you can start to evaluate Brown a little more objectively,
Right.
weigh the pros and cons, and see if it's actually a good fit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't forget to do your research on Providence too, right?
Yeah.
Make sure it's a city where you could actually see yourself living and like thriving.
Because at the end of the day, choosing a job is about more than just the job itself.
It's about choosing a lifestyle, a
Oh, yeah.
community,
Right?
a place where you can grow.
Exactly.
Yeah. So take your time, do your homework, and make a decision that's right for you.
And remember, even if Brown doesn't end up being the perfect fit, this whole process of exploring the opportunity can be really valuable.
Yeah.
It can help you clarify your career goals,
Yeah.
figure out what's important to you,
Totally.
and just be more prepared for your next job search.
Yeah. That's great advice.
Right.
Now, let's go back to that idea of Brown's emphasis on connecting professors and students.
Okay.
We've talked about how this might create a more dynamic and responsive academic environment,
Right.
but how does it actually translate to the work experience for staff members?
Yeah, that's a really important question. Like, does this emphasis on connection extend beyond the classroom?
Right.
Does it influence the overall culture of the university and how people interact with each other?
Yeah, and to answer that, I
Mhm.
think we need to go beyond the official sources. Like, we need to get a sense of the lived experiences of people who actually work at Brown in different capacities.
Yeah, we could look for employee reviews on Glassdoor or
Yep.
read blog posts from current or former staff.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Those sources might give us a more nuanced perspective on what it's really like to be part of the Brown community, both inside and outside the classroom.
Well, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface here, but we've also covered a lot of ground. So, what does all this mean for our listener who is considering a job at Brown? What are like the big takeaways?
I think that the main thing to remember is that Brown is a very complex institution with a very unique culture. It's not just about the Ivy League prestige,
Right.
although that is definitely part of it.
Yeah. It's this weird mix of like tradition and innovation and academic rigor, but also this like more dynamic, almost like startup-y kind of approach, right?
Right, yeah, and that creates both opportunities and challenges for people who work there. So on the one hand, you have this chance to work with some of the brightest minds in the world.
Right. Contribute to cutting-edge research.
Yeah.
Be part of this really prestigious institution.
Yeah, but on the other hand, there's this intense pressure to perform.
Right.
There's a lot of competition, and there's this potential for elitism and exclusivity.
Right. And that's why it's so important to like really go beyond the surface and understand what it would actually be like to work there.
Yeah, don't just look at the website and be like, "Oh, Brown,
Yeah.
that sounds great."
Right. Talk to people who work there, read employee reviews, try to get a sense of like the day-to-day reality.
Yeah, and ask yourself some tough questions.
Right. Like, what are your non-negotiables in a work environment?
Yeah. What kind of culture do you thrive in?
Right. How much weight do you really give to prestige?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the decision of whether or not to work at Brown is a personal one.
Absolutely.
There's no right or wrong answer.
Right. It's about finding the right fit for you.
Yeah. And to do that, you need to gather as much information as possible and be honest with yourself about your priorities.
Exactly. And if you do that, you'll be in a much better position to make an informed decision, whether that means applying for a job at Brown or, pursuing opportunities somewhere else.
Right. And speaking of pursuing opportunities, the material does mention that Brown encourages interested candidates to browse open positions on their HR website
Yeah.
or to contact the relevant school or department directly. So they're at least being transparent about how to apply.
Right. Yeah. Which is good. It kind of shows that they're confident in what they have to offer as an employer.
Yeah, but as we've discussed, it's important to go beyond those initial steps and really do your homework.
Right. Talk to people, ask questions. Don't just accept the official narrative.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say you've done all that. You've done your due diligence, you've weighed the pros and cons, and you've decided, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to apply for a job at Brown. What are the top 3 questions that you would ask during the interview process?
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, well, my first question would be about that nimble culture they keep talking
Oh,
about.
yeah?
I would want to know how it actually plays out in the day-to-day work environment, especially in the specific department I'm interviewing for.
Yeah, like, don't just tell me you're nimble. Like, give me some concrete example.
Exactly, yeah. My second question would be about professional development opportunities.
Okay.
Like, does Brown actually invest in its employees' growth?
Right.
Are there opportunities for training, mentorship, continuing education,
Yeah.
that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good one because it shows that you're thinking long term.
Right,
You're not just looking for like a job.
right.
You're looking for like a career.
Exactly. And for my third question, I would want to get a sense of the work-life
Oh
balance.
yeah.
Like, is it a high-pressure, always-on kind of environment, or is there respect for boundaries and personal time?
Yeah, that's a good one to ask, especially given like all the stuff we've talked about with the like potential for intensity and competition at Brown.
Right, exactly. And those are just a few starting points, of course. The specific questions you ask will depend on, your own priorities and the specific role you're applying for.
Yeah, but I think the key is to be prepared.
Right.
Be thoughtful.
Yeah,
Don't be afraid to ask tough questions.
exactly. Remember, the interview is a two-way street.
Yeah.
It's a chance for you to evaluate them just as much as they're evaluating you.
Yeah, totally. And even if, after all your research and conversations, you decide that Brown isn't the right fit, that's okay too. There are
Absolutely.
plenty of other amazing opportunities out there.
Right. The important thing is to find a workplace where you can thrive, where you feel challenged and supported, and where you can make a meaningful contribution.
So to our listener, we encourage you to keep exploring. Check out Brown's website, look at those employee reviews, maybe reach out to some people who work there, get a feel for the university, for the city of Providence. See if it sparks your interest.
Yeah, Brown's a fascinating place. It has a rich history, a complex culture. Whether it's the right place for you is a question only you can answer, but hopefully this deep dive has given you some tools and insights to, start exploring that question.
Yeah. And no matter where your career path takes you, we wish you the best of luck in finding a workplace that aligns with your values, your goals, and your aspirations.
Absolutely. Happy job hunting.
Thanks for tuning into the deep dive. See you next time.